and to share the experience of their cities whilst overcoming different difficulties they were exposed to during COVID-19. And of course, we still have quite a number of them. COVID and economy, this is subject on our agenda today, and I think that a lot of people are concerned about that. Because it is an integral part of any city's life, and we understand that a lot of people were exposed to the impact of COVID-19. A lot of SMEs found themselves in quite a disadvantaged position. Here, I would like to say that pandemic is not just a threat, but it's also a particular source of opportunities for us. We have to remember that we have quite a number of things that at a certain point of time were put on the back burner. For example, speaking about digitalization of the economy. Yeah, so just compare the periods back like 5 years ago and now, we can see that this area is gaining momentum, and even today's session is just one of the consequences, positive consequences of the pandemic, if we, of course, can use this word positive in the true sense of this word. So, Vladimir Vladimirovich, I think that you would agree with me if I said, let's just organize a virtual meeting to discuss something, then probably you would have thought that something bad had happened. But today we do that in order to talk about very positive things. So those economic perspective that we have discovered throughout this harsh time, well, there have been quite a few, and in some cases they were quite unique. Please don't be shy today, and be willing to share all the opportunities that you have encountered during this difficult period. And I would say that it was the case in many numerous Russian cities we really like. And Vladimir Vladimirovich, it's my pleasure to give you the floor, but before that, I would like to summarize the results of the first session where we talk about COVID-19 and some economic perspective that we discovered within Asian Pacific region. A lot of ideas have been shared, interesting ideas. We listened to Shanghai, Jakarta, Seoul, Singapore, Bangkok, Beijing. They talked about support provided for entrepreneurship, also measures taken to generate jobs, measures to support social economic sectors, different industries. Well, they had a lot in common, but at the same time, every city had its own features. For example, Seoul talked about their special program to support partners and entrepreneurs using Amazon, Taobao, for example. Beijing launched a similar program to support domestic tourism in the country, especially considering the fact that this is quite a well-pronounced and developed domain there. And also some additional package of measures was launched for handicapped people. And also some new forms of cooperating with the population were also developed. And before we proceed to the main parts, I'd like to make an organizational statement. I should say that there are quite a few speakers and a lot of people participating in this module. We're going to talk about some very important issues, but still, since they are quite numerous, please remember that you will be given no more than 10 minutes. We do some math, and we decided that we can only allocate 10 minutes per each speech. I hope that you don't mind. Well, Vladimir Ilyich, I just hope that you don't have any objections to that. Well, thank you very much. Dear colleagues, good afternoon. Thank you very much for finding the time to participate in our today's discussion. It's true that we are working right now in a completely new format. It's a little bit different from our conventional cooperation online, but at the same time, it is still important to have this kind of format in order to exchange the results of the past year. We're living in a completely new paradigm, and also some new economic realities. And of course, we had to take measures to support small size business, we had to support different citizens and also create some kind of a basis of foundation to support our economies and industries. And we do really hope that recovery will not take too much time. Speaking about Moscow, Moscow, just like other big cities, is one of the first locations in this country that was exposed to coronavirus. That is why those solutions we had to take, they were quite prompt, and of course we had to change a lot so bits the system of how we actually worked with our healthcare system. We had to develop some additional capacity, create some new bed capacity, and of course it led to some restrictions in the March, April 2020. As a result, well, and I should say that overwhelming majority of cities were exposed to that. We had quite a cut down on the consumption rate, and also we had quite a problem with SMEs, as well as a shrinkage of many economic indicators. Speaking about how we actually tackled that, well, I would like to highlight that we were really prompt in our actions and we remained transparent in our cooperation with entrepreneurs. We created a special strongholds in the city. There we processed requests coming from entrepreneurs, and in the framework of our cooperation we decided to take 5 measures, I mean anti-crisis measures, to stabilize the situation in the markets. And first and foremost, they were aimed at boosting the current liquidity of entrepreneurship. We were aware of the fact that those economic difficulties that business was exposed to, they had a particular nature, not economic one, but it was explained by the fact that due to all those restrictions imposed, business was deprived of the revenue, but we had to preserve jobs and enterprise themselves. So at the level of the federal government, at the level of the town hall, we decided to take certain measures in order to provide certain tax preferences, tax exemptions, incentives. We also worked with a number of enterprises who completely had to be shut down. For example, malls, they were, they were freed from the burden of rental payments. We also provided for a special program to refinance different loans for SMEs, regardless of the industry they were engaged in. And we also allowed entrepreneurs, due to some tax incentives, really boost their liquidity and also close some of the financial obligations that they had in the face of all the counter agents. So I understand that consumption rate was restricted and other things were restricted, and that is why they were really supported. And at the level of the federal level, we also provided quite a number of loans in order to pay salaries to the employees on provision, of course, that those enterprises were ready to take on certain obligations, which is, to keep the pool of employees. We also provided for certain grant support for example, hotels, entertainment industry, and it allowed entrepreneurs working in that industry to overcome those problems related to all the restrictions imposed. Speaking about the overall package of the measures for entrepreneurs operating within the territory of Moscow, I should say that it was done thanks to the support provided at the federal and national level, and it amounted to $7 billion. That was quite a huge sum, and yes, it was completely absorbed and allowed our entrepreneurs to make it through all those too intense 2 months, and also create a platform for particular economic recovery, especially during the summertime when all the restrictions, almost all the restrictions, were lifted. And we could see that, for example, demand really was restored in July and in August, except for example, such domains as, for example, event organization and management and some others. As for Rospotrebnadzor, I should say that, of course, also had to work with all those restrictions. Speaking about the springtime, the so-called second coronavirus wave, I should say that thanks to the fact that that healthcare system was already prepared. We managed to boost our bed capacities. We developed certain treatment plans. They also managed to prevent the dissemination of the virus. It means that none of the enterprises, none of other entities and premises were closed, and all the restaurants remained open, as well as other locations of this nature. Movie theaters stayed open. So we managed to make it through all the spring periods and also summer periods. Should say that, so yes, we still have some restrictions, but it's mostly about just mask wearing and social distances. That is it. This is some of the most, prominent things. Speaking about something that allows us to stay really functional, to stay efficient, and something that allows us to prevent the shutdown of economy. Well, that was, of course, all about digitalization. A lot of funds were invested in digitalization on behalf of the city, on behalf of the enterprises, and of course, they decided to really invest heavily in digitalization. It allowed to really digitize a big number of services and products. That's, for example, city decided to really digitize quite a big number of services provided at the state level, and now you don't have to go to state establishments in order to, I don't know, make an application or to get certain documents or to perform some other legal actions, including, for example, signing the rental agreements, and you can do it in a digital form without going to all those establishments. You don't have to do that. And of course, it also had a certain positive effect on the consumption demand rate, consumers' demands. We think that, yes, we had a certain shrinkage, 25-30%, and still this threshold is a little bit lower than we used to have. But at the same time, we can see quite a positive figure related to the demand. And if we talk about, for example, February here, we can see that it was 15% higher than a year before. But for example, last year we thought that those dynamics that we had was comparable to 2018, 2019. That was achievable thanks to the fact that we were focused on the domestic consumption, and of course we stay focused on our domestic tourism. We have already launched different interesting projects, for example, with cashback to support our tourism. We also have seen some positive dynamics in also some non-oil and some other segments thanks to this change of focus. So just summarizing the results, I should say that we haven't achieved all the thresholds that we expected, and of course we wanted to have a certain surplus in, for example, gross regional products and so on and so forth, but still it wasn't negative. Well, if we talk about Moscow, we should say that industrial sector has grown by almost 6%, and the scope of volume and also, fixed assets investment has grown on average by almost 2%. So it means that companies, they prefer to invest into their own fixed assets, and we do really have a hope because of that. So that's we're going to have quite a speedy economic recovery. So I think not only we will just really be able to come back to the indicators that we have back in 2019, but we also managed to compensate for some shortage that problems also we have back in 2020. We also hope that vaccination will be of great help. Already 800,000 people have been vaccinated, and I hope that by autumn half of the Moscow population will also be vaccinated, something that will will help us to escape and to avoid the so-called third wave and those restrictions that we had to impose in 2020. You're absolutely right in saying that yes, the pandemic has some not only just cons but also pros. I'm talking about digitalization, implementation of new digital technologies. That's something that enabled us to look at our resources from a different angle and to use them a little bit differently. For example, you can see that we had a lot of meetings in these online formats, and now we also organize in a partially virtual meeting. That is really great, and it has certain advantages as well. Thank you very much, Dmitry.
And we are willing to listen to our colleagues' experience and what are the results in the current situation. Dear Mr. Yefimov, I wanted to add that Russian people are very shy, very modest. It's about you. And we also forget something. I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Dmitry Shugarev. I'm a moderator of today's event. I am a TV anchor and of the Urban Technologies TV program. And we were talking about the economical achievements, which Mr. Yefimov didn't mention because of his modesty. Deputy Mayor of Moscow, in charge of economic policy, in particular international consulting company Ernst & Young, included Moscow into top 3 most efficient cities during the pandemic. Is a very good result, and you didn't mention it. And now let us give the floor to our distinguished guests. Once again, I would like to say that we are happy to see everyone. And now we will be happy to listen to you, to give the floor to Mr. Mayor of Syracuse, Mr. Francesco Italia, who will tell us about the impact of pandemics on Syracuse, what are the challenges and opportunities for this city. And in accordance with that, I would like to add that actually Russia is a really good friend of Italy, and the Russians were worried when the pandemic started. We know that many doctors, many virologists went to Italy during the first wave of the pandemic, despite all the risks for themselves and their loved ones. And it's a very good example to demonstrate the relations between the two countries. Mr. Italia, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm very happy and proud to join this panel. Let me first of all thank very much our host for giving us this great opportunity to share not only our experiences as we heard, but also to give our views on the future. I think it's very important to be here, and thank again for allowing us to do that. I'm going to share now a brief presentation in order for you to be in help following what I'm trying to say. And first of all, I'd like to highlight, okay, let me just briefly present my town. I'm a mayor of a small town. We have 120,000 people. And we are in Sicily, in the middle of the Mediterranean basin. And we are actually, our economy is mainly focused on oil industry and tourism. So you can understand and imagine how strong was the pandemic impact to us. Of course, we tried our best to face this new situation in many different ways, and we were not alone, of course. With municipalities, we have the national and local public bodies, civil society, and NGOs, which have done a great job to support us and to support our citizens. But please let me just briefly focus on the role of the mayors, because we have been, I would say, pushed to the limits, and the mayor's roles has evolved far beyond the traditional area of competence. We tried our best, but as you will see from my pictures, between March, April, and May, I've turned myself into a virologist, a scientist, an expert on any possible task. Because, you know, I was a supplier of protective equipment. I was trying to make my citizens feel taken care of. You can understand, you know that better than me, our people was completely discombobulated, and we had to update them with all the possible information and all the support we were able to provide with them. We had, as I was saying, the help of many, many volunteers. I would say a web of solidarity, and also we have the support, of course, with the Civil Protection Association, but also we had to face protests. In Italy, we had many protests, mainly coming from, I would say, restaurant workers, but not only. And believe me, it wasn't easy at all for us. But we were there for them. We wanted them to feel at ease and to feel taken care of. We've set all the possible initiatives to make people feel close. Therefore, I also was in their houses in this occasion, to wish a happy birthday to a 100-year-old woman. We have done our best. I at least received a phone call by the Pope himself, believe me or not, supporting me. It was a support phone call from Pope Francesco, who was like trying to give his support to me, of course, but also to all the mayors in Italy. Listing the service we provided, I would say, hot meals from all the homeless, medicines for the elderly people, food vouchers, tablets for the students where we had to study online schools, support to people with disabilities, food delivery to seasonal immigrant workers. We also create an educational project to engage families to interact together with their creative skills. But not only. This thing is something that I'm really proud of. You know that students, and mainly young people, has been strongly hit by COVID. And these guys were studying for years and making their best to succeed and graduate. They had to graduate online. So imagine those guys had to graduate in their kitchen or from the couch of their living room. So we decided to give them the mayor's office, and this was so popular, and till today many, many students are graduating from the mayor's office. Again, a way to make my citizens feel taken care of and to feel the public authorities close to them. As I was telling you, from the economical side, of course, Syracuse, with its 2,750 years of history, is a very touristic city. Therefore, and every year we hold very important events such as the International Festival of Greek Theatre. We, of course, at the council, most of them, and we got to do some COVID-free events. As you can see here, I think we showed our resilience there, because we decided to use the normal seating plan of the Greek theater as the stage, and vice versa. Of course, reducing a lot the number of participants. We also had a Dolce & Gabbana COVID-free event in the middle of the historical center. Of course, there was a way to feel also the entertainment industry feel taken care of. And as we know from the state and the regional policies, we had the chance to exempt touristic sector from local, regional, and national taxes. But let me tell you that, who knows, was it enough? I don't know. I can tell you that Many enterprises here in Siracusa won't open again after pandemic. So we'll have to face this, and we'll have to provide them a new floor for starting new businesses. And now that's the third and last part of my presentation. We will try to focus on what we can do now. I think we all learned a great lesson from this pandemic situation, because we all learned that we won't have to get to be unprepared on the main important tasks in public policies. We were not prepared. We can tell that. We were not prepared on the healthcare side. We will not prepare on the educational side. We will not prepared in general. But of course, we tried our best to show resilience and to help as many people as possible. And we have to, in my opinion, what we can do now is to reschedule, utterly reschedule our priorities. And the new priorities in my town are now sustainable architectural solutions, e-mobility, 24 kilometers of new bicycle lanes all around the town, and expanding the green area in the city, making space for nature, as I love to say. We have to make room for the future, and the keywords for the post-COVID era, from my point of view, is schools and educational services, health and social care services, all linked by a new digital way of approaching all the methods, because COVID has shown us how much we have to invest on digitalization in order to get there and to be there and to be prepared when people need us. So I think I'm done with my presentation. Thank you very much for your...
Спасибо, господин Италия, у вас замечательно.
Thank you very much, Mr. Italia. You have a very good last name. It's wonderful. I believe that many people who live in Russia know your island very much, and they are looking forward to come to Italy and enjoy, including of these green, sustainable initiatives which you are promoting. I wish you the best of success in this.
It's been a pleasure to join the panel. Thank you.
Спасибо большое.
Thank you very much. Francesco Italia, mayor of Syracuse Street, was here with us. And now let us move to Austria. And we see Sabina Oller. We see we see that behind her there were words business. Welcome, Mrs. Oller, Director of Vienna Agency of International Business. And let us learn that about Vienna, about its experience. Is the fifth, from the point of view of economy development, city in the European Union. And what are you going to share with us? What experience?
Well, thank you. Let me quickly share my slides. Okay. Can you see the full screen? Yeah?
Да, мы все видим.
Yes, we can see it perfectly well.
Well, first of all, let me thank you, Francesco, for such an inspiring and personal touch in your presentation. We are already absolutely inspired that we long to travel to your beautiful island, really. I live in this very beautiful city myself here in Vienna. But there we want to see the ocean, we want to be free again. Alas, we have to last for a couple of more months until we can hit the ground running. My name is Sabine Oller, and I'm heading the International Business Department of Vienna Business Agency, which is the city's official investment promotion and economic development agency. That's why we have two parts, and trust me, we'll stick to the 10 minutes. I'll be giving you a brief introduction about the layout and setup of Vienna, and then my colleague Alfred Braumann will address a few points specifically with actions and measures that have been taken by the city to help the local economy. Just to give you the lay of the land, I think you're pretty much familiar with Vienna's a strategic location in the heart of Europe, and as much as we appreciate all these direct flight connections, within 3 hours we're everywhere, but all of this came to a very much a halt with the pandemic. Yeah, so I keep traveling myself with a little bit challenging circumstances, but now the airport is deserted. Tourism has been halted. That was mentioned by you also, Francesco. So I think over 90% decrease in that area. Events and conventions was very big. Vienna always ranked among the top 3 event and conference locations. That came to a halt. Yeah, things have been a little bit challenging here as well. Just to give you a very few ideas of what Vienna stands for. Life science, of course, Vienna has been picking up speed in that over the course of the pandemic. Life science has been traditionally a very, very stronghold in Vienna. Digital technologies as much. Maybe one number for you in that area. This digital sector in Vienna is 4 times the size of the tourism industry. I find this always very remarkable because Vienna is known as a tourist destination. You have beautiful pictures in your mind about the white horses and the music capital and all that, but really it's digital technologies which is a much bigger driver of the industry here. Smart urban technologies, also that will be picking up speed as we move into an era where smart cities become a must. That was mentioned also. I think we're in the forefront there, and I will be happy to share many ideas. And of course, last but not least, a very thriving creative sector, which also has been hit very strongly by the pandemic. Just a few things what Vienna stands for originally. We're boasting to have one of the best quality of lives at a very affordable cost, really, as far as housing, public transportation is concerned. City is very well managed. All that is still running very well. We enjoy stability in many areas, political, economic. Still, we're a very dynamic city. We're one of the fastest growing, soon to hit 2 million, coming up in a couple of years. And that does make us the 5th largest city in the European Union. And of course, historically, very diverse, very close access to Central Eastern Europe. The students we have are a large part from that area, speaking many languages, so there's very close ties with Central Eastern Europe. And last but not least, we're also a top educational university hub. And then came COVID. And then here I want to hand over to Alfred and see what really happened with the crisis and how Vienna took care of it.
So, hello. Thanks, Sabina. My colleague Sabina asked me to give you some data and some more information about the policy responses of Vienna on COVID. My name is Alfred Braumann. I'm responsible for economic policy and EU affairs at the Vienna Business Agency. And well, yeah, this was and still is a difficult time. I mean, you see, we did have a drop in GDP in Austria, almost 7%. Of almost 7%. This is the steepest decline after the Second World War. So a really big shock to the Austrian industry, to the Austrian economy. The sectors that have been hit most hardest were accommodation, food service activities, arts, entertainment, recreation. So everything around tourism, everything around gastronomy has been hit very hard by now the 3rd wave of lockdowns in Austria. Austria does have a lot of tourism. Vienna does have a lot of tourism, and this was very difficult and still is difficult for Vienna, where we still have bars closed for indoor eating. Employment did not suffer that much yet. I will come to that in a moment. We saw a decline in employment in Vienna, figures for Vienna from February 2021 compared to February 2020 of -1%. Unemployment rose by 25%, but still, if you compare it with the drop in GDP, this is not that bad, but still there is a big topic that we're having in the field of the labor market. This is a graph that I see repeatedly when coming up to economic data. It shows you the development of GDP in Austria between basically February 2020 and February 2021. So this is very recent data, and on a weekly basis. And you see here in the first part in February, March and April 2020, there was a very steep decline due to the first lockdown, which was really very severe. Private consumption here in blue was down, exports were down, tourism was down, so there was really a very strong impact. Many sectors managed to recover over the summer. We did have a quite good tourism here in outside of the cities. Cities were affected more heavily, and then here in autumn and in the winter, we did have decline again due to the renewed lockdown measures. But if you have a closer look here, this brown, where is it? These parts here. Exports did decline. Here, this brownish part, export did decline heavily in spring and in autumn. But although we do have a renewed lockdown, exports did pick up again now, and the decline is due mostly to private consumption and to reduced tourism activities. So how did Vienna, how did Austria react to this crisis? First, in Vienna, we did see 8 packages for the economy. There were more 8 measures in other sectors, starting from March 2020, and we did present the latest, the 4th aid package just in February of between 15 and 70 million euros. Mostly dedicated to supporting local businesses. The target areas of these 8 packages were digitalization, the tourism industry. There were many activities targeting training activities and direct job creation, and one specific part were the creative industries in Vienna. They are very important for the local economy. On the other hand, we did have way bigger packages on the federal Austrian level. They totaled about 50 billion up to now. The most important part of this was short-term work initiatives. This is still meant to keep the people in the labor force, trying to retrain people while they are not at work, so that once they are in a position to get back to work, they can really start working again and be innovative again.
Господин Паломер, прошу.
Mr. Palomer, sir, probably, we are quite limited in terms of our schedule, and we can actually see all those achievements and figures, and that is really great, and how much was allocated for economic recovery and for assistance. So if you don't mind, I have just very short question for you, and I want a short answer from you, Vladimir Vladimirovich. Yes, for quite a while last year in Moscow, we saw not just a shrinkage, but a real rise of the consumption. And, well, we can see that, yes, there was a real shrinkage in April and May, where restrictions were imposed. But starting from summer, and by the middle of summer, we see quite a speedy recovery. So it was quite comparable to 2019. And starting from July up till the end of the year, our consumption rate and overall revenue of all the enterprises actually exceeded the indicators of 2019 by 19 or 20% or something. Yes, we could actually see that on the graph and on the curves. Yes, how it can actually be explained? That is a question for you, actually, Alfred. That
We did see this big shrinkage here, private consumption here in blue in the first lockdown in spring. Online shopping and shops for foods opened over the summer recovery, and then again we started having lockdowns in Austria starting with end of October 2020, and here you see again that consumption which was physically not possible apart from consumption, online consumption and consumption in a very restricted set of shops. So we do have a shrinkage of private consumption. We do not have a shrinkage of investment, but here just due to the physical impossibility to go to the shops, they started to reopen just 2 weeks ago, and now we're in the phase of let's see how the next weeks develop, but opening up. So probably this, you already see it here on the right-hand side, the last 3-4 weeks that we almost are on the level of last year, but still consumption is down and
Да, это вот как раз направленность.
Yes, exactly. We can see that the red line goes up, actually. Yes, thank you very much, Alfred. Vienna is still quite under considerable restrictions. But anyway, Alfred, thank you very much. Thank you very much. And say hello again to Sabine Olerf. Say thanks for her beautiful presentations and for your visual presentation and actual information that you shared with us. And now let's proceed to Rio de Janeiro. Under Secretary of Economic Development, Rio de Janeiro City Hall, Mr. Marcel Balesiano is with us. He will also be talking about some challenges and opportunities related to this post-COVID period. And I should say that in 2020, Rio de Janeiro launched an international initiative against COVID, which is called Rio Plus International Against COVID-19. It will be nice if you could extrapolate a little bit more on that initiative against COVID-19 and measures that were taken to support the economy.
First of all, I would like to congratulate the complex of economic policy, anthropology, and land relations in our scope, Department for
that focuses on attracting tech talent and any individual that works from home. Because of COVID, people are now working from home, and because they're working from home, now they can work from anywhere. So one of the campaigns we have is work in the sunrise, live in the sunset. We want individuals to experience our community. We want individuals to invest in our community, be part of our community, and prosper with us. So we look forward to, again, forging those relationships. We want to continue being a passport to the world. We encourage those cities that are on the call, Buenos Aires, Rio de Janeiro, Moscow, to become our sister cities and also partner with us and continue this dialogue. It's a beautiful dialogue, a wonderful dialogue, and we look forward to supporting you all as well.
Да, вот как ваш коллега...
Yes, just like your colleague from Moscow said, well, yes, when I look at your pictures, beautiful pictures, I really wanted to feel the warmth of this southern sun on the skin. It's really fantastic. A lot of, sun in your work. And when you show those pictures, I have a feeling that I have just visited Florida, really. But unfortunately, borders are still closed. But I should admit that when I watch some political dialogues or debates, feels like that we are different. But when I look at such initiatives and at such projects that you are involved in, well, I think that we do really have a lot in common, because you are ready to sacrifice your time and to really do everything you can to help others, to help people around you, and help those in particular, those who are deprived of medical assistance, cannot go to a grocery store on their own. It's really great when you can obtain that. Well, you can find such words even in Bibles. And by the way, I wanted to say a few words about our sessions. Yes, we have quite a lot of representatives from the United States. Many people might say that we have quite bad relations with the United States, but let's see. I would like to give the floor to First of all, Mr. Andy Chavari for the presentation. Andy Iken, I would like to give you the floor, and I would like to thank Greg Chavari for your speech. So I know that right now in Texas you don't have any income tax. Could you please tell us what other measures for economic support you also have in Texas and Houston, especially in this COVID times, in the space capital of the United States? Mr. Egan?
Appreciate the opportunity to talk to this forum, and I thank all of our hosts from Moscow for arranging what is a very broad-based discussion. So thank you all very much. I also want to extend my regards to Deputy Mayor Efimov and all of the city officials who are part of this. The COVID pandemic, as many as have talked today, certainly has had worldwide implications. And this forum is testimony to the fact that we've all been impacted in one way or another. Economically, it certainly has hit us in many ways, which I'll describe in a second. But in most cases, the impact of the virus has been very personal to the people, and what I just saw from Fort Lauderdale in terms of dealing with food distribution and things have hit people right at the things that count the most. Truly, the global pandemic has had impacts across all of our regions. All of the Houston industries have been impacted in one way or another. And of course, in some ways, this was compounded in the very early stages by what hit the energy industries and what happened with crude oil prices and the impact of that. And we were many unable to do just routine things that hit us, and our small businesses suffered, particularly because of the required lockdowns early in the stages of this. The city itself faced a budget crisis. The city's economics are a little different than some other cities. We don't benefit from income taxes one way. The city depends about 40% of its revenue on sales taxes, 40% on property taxes, and the rest on services that we provide. Sales taxes were very significantly impacted, and still are today, by that. But I will comment in a second about how we've made up for that, and the federal government has been very helpful in that. In the early stages, the federal government allowed us to provide the necessary services for testing and the public health facilities that occurred. But the facts are that what made Houston strong in the beginning still exists. We remain home to NASA's space program, and of course have had long relationships with Russia in that program today. We're also home to the largest medical center in the world, and certainly day in and day out, we have had discussions. My office has been very involved in first the testing programs, and then secondly, I'll come back on what we're doing on the vaccination programs that are well underway in Texas and in the United States right now. The resource of this city, and most importantly, besides those industries, are the workforce we have here. Houston has long had a very strong STEM-based workforce. We are the city in the United States with the largest concentration of engineers in whatever industry is involved in the city here. We have been turning that of late, and this is over the last 3 or 4 years, into very many concentration on startups and activities in that area. We have gone down the road very significantly with Rice University to create an innovation hub that actually will start up next week in the operation, with major tenants like Google and Microsoft very much engaged in those activities. The incubation of new startups has progressed very rapidly, and we now have over 8 different incubators in the city that are working in various forms, not just in energy, not just in software, but in all facets of industry that we have. On top of all that, what we recognize, what every city recognizes, to attract and retain the best workforce, one has to focus on quality of life. We have spent a great deal of effort, starting with citizens' initiatives on parks and recreations and bike lanes and ability for people to have a walkable community. So that we have an inclusive community too, because the focus here is not just on what happens in parts of town or downtown, but it cuts across all 676 square miles of the city of Houston. The property tax so far has not been impacted, so we have had that revenue source to do that. But the slowdown in business travel has impacted our convention and entertainment business and our hotel business here in the city. The city itself had lost some 350,000 jobs. We've recovered about 100,000 of that 250, but there is much more to be done as we start to see business beginning the efforts in Houston to return to work, and there are early stages of that happening right now. The biggest job losses were in the energy industry, not surprisingly, and they have been the slowest to recovery. The recovery in crude oil prices of late has started to have its impact in that industry. The federal government did pass what was called initially the CARES Act, and this did provide cities with resources to manage the early stages of this. Often we devoted a lot of those resources to testing and being sure that we were, wherever possible, dealing with that piece of this. Contract tracing is very much in place here, and they're all related to supporting the CARES Act. I mentioned the medical center. The Texas Medical Center has 58 institutions that are part of it. I participate in a bi-weekly call that we manage the trends and be sure the resources are most focused on what is needed here. The rest of the CARES Act money was spent largely in rent subsidization. Some programs the city worked on doing it. We spent over $35 million for small business nurturing and to help them recover and weather the storms we have there. We spent over $5 million to deal with the arts community and try to help those organizations do one or another. As we look at coming out of the crisis, we still daily make the point that we're not over it yet. Mask wearing, while not mandated any longer by the state, is still encouraged by all the local jurisdictions, including state officials, so that as the data has improved in Houston and in the United States, we talk very strongly about continuing preventive measures like social distancing. The vaccination programs have taken over very significantly here in the last 2.5 months. As of today, about 25% of the population in the United States and in Texas and in Harris County have had at least one shot in their arm, and we're approaching 15% have had both doses of vaccinations right now. We press on that continuously. Federal government has come in, and we're operating at our large football stadium in town, and in the last 3 weeks, 126,000 vaccinations have occurred, and the second shots will begin today. That's happening. We are talking to the federal government about extending that one way or another. There are lessons to be learned on the vaccination distribution, and we are in the process of accumulating all of them. Doing single mass vaccinations has its role, but outreach to underserved communities has been a large focus of what we've done. The Texas programs have focused initially on those that were over 65 years of age and those that had underlying conditions. We're starting to bring that down now. Now it's 50 and above. And just in the last week, we have added school teachers to that program, all looking towards what the president has said, a program of reopening. And of course, his target date that was widely publicized was July 4th of this year. We're hoping to achieve that within Texas and within Harris County at that time. We are looking at how we build the community forward from here. Resiliency is part of our city's mantra at this point. Climate change and how we build that forward is part of what we're doing. So as we look forward to the next few years of things happening and the funding that's become available, the focus for the city of Houston will building a stronger and more resilient economy for what we stand here. As you've probably seen, we've just gone through what was very uncharacteristic for Houston and Texas, ice storm that we've had to do that. So each of these things tell us about how, as a government, we can create a more resilient economy and things to have our citizens prosper in this environment. And that would conclude my formal remarks at this point.
Да, господин Икин, я думаю,
Yes, Mr. Ikin, I believe that we can also share on how the Russia fights the weather condition, because we got used to snow. We know how to tackle even such kind of weather condition. As for the vaccination, of course, everyone is engaged in monitoring the vaccination process, because it is something that depends on the pandemic development. But scientists they say that the next pandemic is possible. You shall have to be prepared to the tackling same situation again. Now the unprecedented measures are taken for support of business, for public health care, which is very important in these conditions. Mr. Iken, thank you very much for your presentation. And now we are just following the geographical way to the neighbors of Texas. We proceed with the senior advisor of the Secretary on Economic Development of the Government of the City of Mexico. We have Mr. Jair Eridan Cabrera Padilla with us. Mr. Padilla, welcome. Happy to welcome you. Big city, 21 million population agglomeration of Mexico. It's just like Moscow in a working day, in the middle of the week. Of course, we are interested in the measures taken during this period and your unique developments which support you, which facilitate working with both population and business circles, and we hope to learn from you.
Dimitri, good evening everyone in the European continent, and good morning to my fellow partners in the Americas. Yes, Dimitri, indeed, Mexico City is a 21 million people city, and considering its metropolitan area, which makes it one of the largest and densest agglomerations across the world. I'd just like to start mentioning that Mexico City is the capital of Mexico, so it's the power, it's the political, the economic, and the cultural center of the country. So it's a really densely populated city, and it's a really complicated city but a beautiful city to manage its economy. I'd like to begin with a really brief presentation of how its economic structure before COVID-19. And essentially, in terms of territory, Mexico City only has around 9 million people. Its metropolitan area is the one that has 21 million people. It has roughly around 470,000 economic units, businesses, enterprises, factories. And we have an active population of 4.4 million people. And just in 2019, we had the largest FDI reception in 20 years. So we basically come from a growing dynamic in terms of the economy, and also our international trade is one of the largest in the country, and it was just reaching one of its highest points so far. And Mexico City has definitely a service economy, roughly around 87% of it. It's basically in terms of services and retail trade. Just to highlight some of the top industries in terms of GDP are financial and insurance services. Mexico City is a hub for any financial service across the country, and Latin America also. We also have an important information, technologies and communication and mass media hubs in Mexico City. And of course, real estate is also a big industry in Mexico City, as it's a one of the top touristic destinations in the world. Also, it has a really large hotel industry. And of course, retail is one of the largest industries in the country. And all of these industries and all of this economic structure shifted and had several impacts when the COVID-19 pandemic hit the country. Especially, it came down to the lockdowns. We had the first one in March to June 2020. So Mexico City and the entire country basically follows the guidelines of a traffic light system for opening the economy. So that means that in every color we have a different set of industries opening. Today, as a matter of fact, we still are in orange light system, the color. And basically what it means is now today we had to open some of the non-essential economic activities, pretty much everything like agriculture, health, food supply, logistics, financial services, ICT, manufacturing, and construction, and open entirely. But we still have closed like cinemas and stadiums, theaters, and everything that has to do with closed spaces for like nightlife, bars, etc. The impact we had is around 200,000 businesses temporarily closed when the lockdowns hit, when the red light hit and the traffic system. That affected around 2.1 million jobs. That means that people had to stop moving to the offices, to the factories, and to the stores where they work, and start to cope with these new models of working from home, working from a distance, and of course all the challenges that comes with it. We still are estimating and trying to calculate the GDP impact on the economy, but we estimate it's around 6.6% hit on 2020 for Mexico City, and that translates into a roughly 200,000 jobs lost. But well, here comes the economic recovery plan, and I'd just like to mention that any recovery plan is based essentially on the vaccination in essence. Of course, we still have a long way to go, and here's where international cooperation comes into place. For vaccination distribution, currently Mexico City is using the Sputnik vaccine on its population, but also Sinovac and Pfizer vaccines. And of course, here's where we need to improve our international cooperation so we have a more equal distribution of vaccines across the globe. And having said that, Mexico City Economic Recovery Plan is essentially based on three main, let's say, chapters. As you know, Mexico City has very important challenges in terms of the informal economy. So that means that social welfare is one of our main political policies. Here we, of course, coordinate with the federal government and, of course, the government of Mexico City to address any circumstances dealing with social welfare. Of course, the second aspect is business support. Anything that has to do with addressing businesses' needs to sustain jobs and also to not shut down their curtains. And of course, the third pillar we are looking to is public and private infrastructure. Infrastructure is going to be crucial for economic recovery for any city, for any country, and especially in Mexico City, where we have a huge ton of infrastructure opportunities to address. So in terms of social welfare, most of the programs were directed to scholarships for students to have a basic income allowance for families with 1, 2, 3, 4 children. It doesn't matter how many children. It's a scholarship for every child. Of course, going to school, taking classes, and it goes from basic, middle, high school, and undergrad studies. That means that we cover roughly around 2.5 million people, not only with the scholarships, but also with other programs that also help mostly students to keep going with their studies. Students' desertion from schools was on a historic high level. So we wanted to address that. We wanted to keep young people studying and preparing themselves and have the incentives to continue improving their abilities into getting into a job market eventually. Of course, as our colleagues in Fort Lauderdale, we had community kitchens. Food was also a basic concern for many people living in really poor conditions across the country. And of course, this meant that we had to install around 300 community kitchens across the city, especially in the poorest neighborhoods, so everyone had at least a meal and at their disposable availability. Also, we had economic support for different groups like restaurants workers, waitresses, chefs, hostess, everyone, and also for the hotel industry. And then we expanded this support to all craftsmen and women in the city. We have a lot of craftsmen workers with their own brands that also had several, of course, lower sales and lower incomes. Concerning in terms of business support, we had a really strong collaboration with the federal government in terms of credits, and of course also in terms of the development banks created several special credit lines for businesses from all sizes, but especially for small and medium-sized enterprises. We'll still also, I would like to touch a specific program that we are really keen on promoting, which is Young People Building the Future. This is a program from our president, Andrés Manuel López Obrador. Basically, the program consists of addressing subsidizing workers for businesses. So we know that some businesses are laying off their workers. So what we're doing is just paying a basic income allowance to some skilled workers, because most of these young people are between 18 to 30 years old, so they have, some of them, several studies, and we basically are focusing this program for the economic recovery of the most hit hard industries. And well, in terms of public and infrastructure, I'll show you a little bit more. But basically, we're investing more than ever before in terms of infrastructure for health, for education, for public space recovery, and of course, Mexico City is a seismic region, so we still have an important earthquake reconstruction program for buildings that were affected on 2017 earthquake. And of course, the private sector here is going to be a huge a crucial actor in addressing several public-private infrastructure projects. These are just some of the infographics that we use for social media, mass media, to showcase a little bit of the programs that I just mentioned and to let the population know about these programs. And of course, we also distributed some COVID-19 kits. These small-sized kits had like health, like a thermometer, like a mask, and some medicines, and also a monthly food enough for a month, for people to stay at home. This is also some of the infographics that we were using for all the credit programs that we were launching with the federal government and the local government, with the development banks, and also letting people know how it works, the amounts they can borrow, the interest rates. We also gave people a 3-month period of not paying at the beginning of the credits, most of them just for them to get an income and settle a little bit the concerns. And in terms of public and private infrastructure, well, we are investing heavily in terms of transport and mobility. We understand that letting people move across the city and to the economic centers is still a priority and is still a way to lift off people from poverty. So we just inaugurated last week the latest and the first cable car in Mexico, and of course this is going to be one of the most important transport systems, and it has already 1 line and 3 more lines coming on their way. And most of these projects also include, for instance, a new hospital in a remote community, rural area in Mexico City. Even you don't believe it, we still have rural areas in Mexico City. And of course, we have a program that's called Pilares, which is basically around 300 new community centers for people to get cultural, economic, health, and different kinds of opportunities in these community centers. And this map in this image is just showing the orange square is basically downtown Mexico City, which is undergoing a major renovation that it's never been done before in downtown Mexico City. As you know, it's a city of roughly 700 years and it has long history, and plenty of historic buildings are being restored and renewed, and across with several public spaces also. And we also defined 12 development corridors where we are giving special tax incentives for real estate developers to build housing, affordable housing specifically, and also for businesses to install. And well, this is just a little bit more of all the measures that we are including. Of course, we have a lot going on. I remember this is our interinstitutional effort, but just to summarize a little bit, we're going through a really strong effort to simplify and digitize all the red tape. We want to make all the public documents and permits available online, not to be going to any offices, and also this will help us avoid corruption at some of the places. Of course, we have a really strong program on training and advisory for small, medium-sized businesses, and specifically helping them to incorporate into the e-commerce activities. Of course, now this is going to be one of the largest and most dynamic economic activities. We also have a safe tourism seal and standard, which we are promoting across all establishments related to tourism. This includes some of the highest levels in terms of sanitary protocols for it to be safe for people to travel, for tourism and businesses, and other reasons. Mexico City has or roughly around the year 12 million visitors. So that's a lot of people to handle. I'd just like also to stop a little bit on one of the largest strategic
Господин
projects we
Пади,
have in
если
Mexico.
можно покороче, вот.
Could I ask you to be a little bit brief as possible, because we're really running out of time and we have one more speaker.
Just quickly, we have one new industrial area, which is called Vallejo, and it's basically for all investments related to advanced manufacturing and sustainability. We also have our largest solar plant being built right now in the wholesale market in Mexico City. And of course, we are advancing a lot in terms of circular economy initiatives across the city in terms of, for example, a biodiesel plant using oil from restaurants from other places. And I'd just like to thank everyone, and that's pretty much it.
Спасибо огромное, господин Пади. Вы упомянули, кстати, вакцинацию.
Thank you very much, but you also mentioned vaccination, and I also wanted to mention some news appeared several days ago. And by the way, starting from the 7th of March, while another stage started for aged people, and actually it's about to start in the capital of Mexico, in Mexico, for aged people specifically. Yes, another vaccination program is well underway there. Thank you very much, Mr. Padilla. And now we're about to proceed to the next speaker, and there they have very positive experience of economic interaction for countering COVID-19. That is San Francisco. We're now being joined by Mark Chandler, Head of International Trade and Commerce, San Francisco. Mr. Chandler, we would like to say that you accumulated incredible experience in fighting COVID-19, and San Francisco was recognized as one of the most successful cities in the United States because your mortality rate is really low. Please, over to you.
Thank you very much. First, thank you to all in Moscow for organizing this fascinating and very educational event. And good evening and good afternoon to my colleagues in across Europe and North America. And a lot of what we've heard today from my colleagues from the other cities, San Francisco is doing the exact same thing. Many of the kinds of programs and projects and that you've heard about, we're doing also. But today I'm just going to give you a quick snapshot of what has happened in terms of COVID in our city, some of the results, and then some of the lessons that we've learned from that. And I'll be very quick. I know I think I'm the last speaker, so we'll try to make this brief so that we stay within our time period. First, here is a a quick timeline of how COVID hit San Francisco. Obviously, it was hitting in China in December and January of 2019 and 2020. We opened our emergency center, our emergency operations centers in January, late January of 2020, again ahead of anywhere else, to our knowledge, in the United States. And our mayor was the first in the United States to issue a state of emergency on February 25th, 2020. And I can tell you she was roundly criticized for doing that. People said, this is unneeded, this is alarmist, you're hurting our city, you're hurting our state. And she was roundly criticized. All of our telephones were ringing off the hook the day after she did that. But it turned out to be obviously the correct and right move. And what that did is allowed us to start to implement many programs under emergency declaration, which you can't do in normal times. So we were able to move very, very quickly. And then our mayor in the region here in San Francisco was the first to lock down in the United States. The announcement was on March 16th, and we actually locked down 1 year ago today. And that was the first lockdown in the United States. And again, we were roundly criticized for that. However, 2 days later, the state of California locked down, and then within days, weeks, you saw much of the rest of the country locking down. In hindsight, and this is one of the lessons, in hindsight, those movements that we had leadership here that were willing to make this step early, that they listened to science and they shut us down, probably saved thousands and thousands of lives. And we can compare it to New York in a second. We had partial reopening over the summer, just like I think every city on this conference today, where things were getting back. A lot was still closed, but you could do many activities. But then in the fall, that started to turn, and by Christmas time, we were back into a lockdown. We're now coming out of it. We are in what's called the red tier now, kind of like Mexico City had tiers. We have tiers here from purple, red, orange, yellow. San Francisco now is in the red tier, which allows most things to be open, including movie theaters. Bars cannot be open, but restaurants are serving indoors. Almost all retail is open. Museums are open, all with various restrictions. So we're moving very quickly here in California and the state in San Francisco. So here's some of the economic results that we saw with COVID. We had an unemployment rate of around 2% for about the last 3 years prior to COVID. It was really full employment here in San Francisco, which was pretty amazing. That's now, last month was 6.5%, but we saw a spike in about April or May of up to 12% as everything shut down. With reopening, many jobs have come back, especially in things like restaurants and our tourism sector a little bit. So, but we're still 3 times the unemployment rate we were pre-COVID. Our commercial vacancy, we're a big urban business center, it has tripled from virtually very little space available for businesses to now 19 and 20%. And that's due again to many companies or businesses shutting down, number one. And also for many companies discovering that the work at home model works and they don't need big floor plates any longer. And I'll talk about that in a bit. Our rental rates have declined 20 to 25%. We were the most expensive rental market in the United States. We're not anymore. Again, this was a function of the work from home movement, where many people decided to work from home. Well, home's going to be in Colorado, or home's going to be in the mountains, or maybe home's going to be with Greg in Fort Lauderdale. We've heard those, Greg. And so the residential rates have gone down. Surprisingly, home ownership cost of land and property has gone up. So we've seen a very interesting phenomena there. Airport traffic, a measure of tourism, down 80 or 90% from pre-COVID levels. And interestingly, mass transit, our subway systems, our buses, have been virtually empty throughout the year. So here's the human factor, the more important factor. As of yesterday or the day before, we had about 34,500 cases of COVID here in the city of San Francisco and about 446 deaths. That's tragic, but yet that's amazing when you compare it with any other city in the United States. We have the lowest death rate of any large city in the United States. It's around 36 per 100,000. You can compare that to New York of 219 and our sister city to the south of us here in California, Los Angeles. So that's pretty amazing results, and one of the reasons we're very proud. We have about a 1% fatality per case rate here. Again, comparing us with New York, we're a quarter of what their rates are. 27% of our population, and actually this morning I got new numbers, 31% of our population here in the city has received at least one vaccine. And 20% of us are fully vaccinated. I got my second shot yesterday. Our mayor got her shot yesterday, and she got hers with the new Johnson & Johnson one-shot policy. So we are moving ahead very quickly with vaccinations. We expect to have our whole city vaccinated, if supply continues, by June. Why did we have those low death rates? How did we do that? That's the question. Well, first, undoubtedly having strong political and health leadership made a difference. Our political leaders and our health leaders came together early. They listened to the science, and they made strong and very difficult decisions very quickly, shutting down our city, shutting down schools, implementing masks, social distancing. Undoubtedly, that made a huge difference. We shut down a week to 10 days ahead of New York City, and you can see the difference in the numbers strictly because of that time. We're very lucky in San Francisco that we have a very large and vibrant health sector. We have many hospitals. We have one of the largest research medical institutions here in San Francisco. And this health sector not only is large, sophisticated, but many of the leaders of it have pandemic experience because San Francisco was ground zero for the HIV/AIDS pandemic of the 80s and early 90s. That was a different kind of pandemic, but we had people that lived through that and knew what kinds of responses you had to make when you had a medical emergency. For example, they understood right away that one of our dangers was nursing homes. And that's where death is going to happen with this pandemic. And we were able to keep it out of our nursing homes here. We have one huge city-run senior facility with 1,500 people in it. We only lost 4 to COVID. Compare that again with many other places. We are very lucky that because of the strong leadership and because we're a highly educated city, the people here embraced COVID control measures very quickly. We put on masks ahead of, I think, most other Americans. We understood social distancing. We started to work from home. The people bought in, and they bought in quickly. Our city leaders and the health people recognize that this pandemic has an economic divide. Those that can work from home, that live in nice houses, weren't nearly as much danger as our lower income communities that could not stop working and often lived in multi-generational homes. And so we immediately moved into getting testing, getting medical facilities into those neighborhoods and to those people. They're often not English language speakers, so we went into it with Cantonese, with Spanish, with other languages, that we understood quickly that those neighborhoods, those cultures were probably going to be hit very good. And our economy, because we are a tech capital and a business center, was able to move to work at home very easily. We didn't have to shut down factories or those kinds of plants. So that's why we think we're successful. What are some of the issues that we're facing in the future? I could go into our programs. They're almost identical to what every other city has said today. But we found a couple of things. One, it's given us an ability to implement and provide some new city policies probably much quicker and much more efficiently than we could under our old bureaucratic system. We've shut down streets to create parklets to allow restaurants to do outdoor seating, which we didn't allow in the past. Our transit system, we've been able to wipe it off the map and rebuild it. It was really designed about 75 years ago, and obviously situation is different, so we're going to have a whole new transit system. And we've created, much like everybody else on this call, a whole series of new small business support programs, especially for those in the arts and entertainment, hospitality, those areas that have been hit very hard, along with training programs. The questions that remain for us and the big challenges are, will big, large office buildings that a major urban center like San Francisco and other cities depend on, will they be relevant? We're hearing that 75 to 80% of our tech companies, and we're the headquarters of Uber and Twitter and Facebook, et cetera, are looking to do what they call work at home first policies, which means you'll work from home, you'll have an office, but you'll work from home 3 to 4 or 5 days a week, maybe once you only go into the office. That's going to change, and we're already seeing our tech companies taking large square footages and cutting them down. That can have severe implications for urban areas, for our own finances, and of course for the businesses that support that. That's still out there to be decided. We're wondering, will business travel and tourism come back? We think it will, but we're a big conference and convention city. Will those come back, or will we do everything like we're doing today, digital? Again, that's a huge financial implication for the city. And then finally, the financial questions for government. So far, we're fine. Our tax base, which is largely based on property, has stayed stable, and the federal government, as Houston said, has come in and has supported us. So right now, our government is in financially very good shape. We look for the next year. But what happens if we lose these large floor plates? What happens if the conventions and conferences don't come back? What happens if all the tech workers decide to live with Greg in Fort Lauderdale? That can have serious implications for our government finances and the programs that we run for our socially distanced groups, for our low-income communities, for education, etc. So we think we've been very successful in the human element of COVID in keeping, frankly, the death rate as low as possible because of a lot of factors, but there's still huge questions facing us in the future. So again, thank you to Moscow and to all that have spoken today. It's been fascinating. Thank you very much for sharing time.
Thank you, Mr. Chandler. Actually, these issues which you raised in front of the large municipalities, they are the same. Every city faces that. They are asked by people, by citizens, by managers, by politics and politicians, which are currently analyzing their advantages and disadvantages during this most complicated period, which I believe we have successfully survived and which will be in the past, and we will forget about that, despite the fact that some scientists say that we will not forget about this. We have just a couple of minutes to maybe, if any of you have questions to your colleagues, maybe you could clarify something, or you could give a comment or a remark. We would be happy to give you the floor. But remember, we have just a couple of minutes. If you have questions, please feel free to ask. I mean, our participants, our speakers. Well, since everything is absolutely clear, I believe that we were very detailed. We dwelt on the measures taken in many cities. Different cities, actually, we have many things in common. And I am more and more confident the longer I live that people are very similar despite the distance between them, I mean thousands of kilometers. This list, where the results of the conference, which took part in the morning with representatives of large cities of Asia-Pacific region, and I realized that they faced absolutely the same problems, and the tasks were resolved the same way. Mr. Yefimov, you are a host of this event, and I would like to give you the floor. First of all, I would like to thank you all for your time, for your participation, share your experience, all the issues, discussed how we can tackle the situation, what to do with offices which now are vacant, how to adopt economy. These are the challenges which we have to resolve during the coming year, and of course the key priority is protection of our residents, of our citizens, saving lives. That is why all the measures we take shall first of all compensate all the restrictions we introduced. Thank you very much for exchange of experience. I believe that we will continue our cooperation on the level of our routine work. The specialist experts will continue working, and we will be looking forward for the recovery of international relations and interactions. We will organize an event in an offline format, and we will meet each other in person. Thank you very much. I would like to thank you for the enthusiasm which I witnessed, not only in your presentations and your speeches, but in your eyes, especially Mr. Chevaria, who has a great slogan which he provided to us. I believe that everybody enjoyed.
Почему бы и нет? Спасибо всем огромное.
Спасибо, до свидания.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.